This is the first time we are going to deal in a substantive discussion of COVID-19 and its effects on our state. And after shutting down segments of our state to protect people from infection, as that process was going on, we kept hearing that we have heroes that are still showing up to work. Despite so many parts of our society being shut down, we have people working through this. Essential workers, we call them. And these essential workers showed up. They made sure that we had ambulance services. They made sure we had fire protection, people responding to our emergencies. They made sure our streets were safe. And they made sure our food supply was intact. And as this virus progressed in our state, we saw an alarming trend. It started in my hometown of Columbus Junction. We saw an outbreak in a meatpacking plant. And that meatpacking plant is the same one that my grandfather spent 20 years as chief union steward in. I'm very proud of that legacy in our family. I'm very proud of that community that I grew up in. I'm not proud about what happened there. I'm not proud to see hundreds of people get infected and our state not respond. We didn't immediately say, let's send in the OSHA inspectors and see what's happening. In fact, it really seemed like we said, keep the OSHA inspectors out so they don't get sick. So we wait, and we wait, and we wait for the session to resume. And the session resumes, and we finally take up that COVID-19 bill. And here it is. And it offers that protection. No, not for any of the workers. No, specifically we are saying to the Iowans who get infected, we are actually taking this opportunity. This government is saying we're going to lessen your rights. We are taking something away from you. 600 people have died. I get that there is a disagreement on how we should respond to this. I get, as I walk into this chamber and I see I have colleagues who are wearing masks and colleagues who are not wearing masks, there's a difference in our opinions on how we respond to this. But separate from the opinions about this virus are some facts. People are dying. They're dying because they go to work in places that aren't protecting them. Some are, some aren't. And that's where we step in. We are here to protect our citizens. And yet this legislation is what is brought forth. We can find a way to offer an amendment on a bill dealing with the county seal to change how elections are run. But this majority party can't find a window to help an injured Iowan who was infected because he or she was told they were an essential employee. And instead, we find a way to protect the business that did little to nothing to protect them. That's what this legislation is about. Well, what this amendment does is says, you know what? If we're going to offer protection to an employer to say you are immune from liability, you at least have to meet some basic thresholds of workplace safety. We keep throwing out guidelines for worker protection, not rules, guidelines. What this amendment does is says to the labor commissioner, we need you to change these guidelines into rules. We need you to enforce rules for workplace safety in regards to COVID-19. And employers, if you don't follow the rules, you don't get the immunity. It's the first tiny step to a two-way street here. Mr. President, Senator Whiting, in his opening remarks, talked about how we don't protect the bad actors with this legislation. We actually do. We don't protect the most evil, heinous actors. That's the only exclusion in this legislation. It's not negligence. It's not gross negligence. We use words like malice. Malice. I would hope we can at least agree that if you showed malice to the people showing up in your packing house, you don't get immunity. But I think we can call on ourselves to do a tiny bit better than that. So, Mr. President, the purpose of this amendment is at least to put some basic framework to what gets you to an immunity. And that basic framework is you at least have to follow some guidelines from the state on what needs to be done to prevent infections in your workplace. We need the state to start stepping up. As I mentioned the other day, I went into one of those packing houses. And I had a conversation with a plant manager. And part of that conversation was, how do we make things better? Because they had taken some actions. You know what they were willing to do? Something that was completely out of the question in so many ways before. Share with other companies to learn from each other about better ways to protect workers. You know who is a great partner to do that? The state. That's where the state comes in and says, I want to hear from all these different operations on what you're doing to make workers safe so we can figure out at Facility 1 and Facility 2 how to combine those practices and increase safety at both. Instead, what we got a press conference saying we're just going to let the industry take the lead on this. And of all industries to take the lead, particularly meat packing. An industry that has never been synonymous with workplace safety. When Upton Sinclair wrote The Jungle, he talked about how the government doesn't step in and do something to protect these workers. It's over 100 years ago, and it could have been written yesterday. He talked about how they'd become dens of infection. Could have been written yesterday. And instead, today, we're taking a step in the opposite direction with this legislation. We're actually providing immunities that weren't there. So, Mr. President, I hope our members can read this legislation and see that we need to do something to start taking responsibility as a state to protect our citizens. The purpose of this amendment is to put some very simple requirements to qualify for the immunity here. With that, I'll take questions on the amendment.
Is there discussion on the amendment? The chair recognizes the senator from Delaware, Senator Zumbach.
Thank you, Mr. President. Interesting amendment and interesting comments. I admire your ability, Senator Boulton. You are an amazing speaker. And your ability to articulate and accentuate your thoughts is nothing short of immaculate. And I commend you for that. The interesting part about this is I also have friends and family from the Columbus Junction area. And get to know a lot of those folks very, very well also. And as a farmer, you know, these packing plants, your pigs come from all over, including my area. So every packing plant is important to all of Iowa. Every worker in those packing plants is important to all Iowa. And the managers of those facilities did take actions to protect those workers right away. But here's the big difference. And I'm really shocked, as sharp as you are, that you missed this, because you're sharp. They work in that plant 8 hours a day. They work hard. They work side by side. And then they go home. And then they're home and away from that plant 16 hours a day. A very social community. They love being with their friends. They love being with their families. And no matter what you do inside that plant, they got them for 8 hours. That's it. And those other 8 hours, if you know the folks from that community, they're enjoying life. They're spending time together. They're socializing. They're spending time with their families, as they should make those personal choices. This is about ensuring that those folks have a place to work long term, ensuring the people that bring the animals into those plants have a place to bring them to. This is way bigger than just the workers, than just the employees. It's about all of Iowa. All of Iowa. I represent all those folks. This is about securing the economy and the lives and the families for Iowans. We need to protect these workers' jobs to ensure they have a place to go back to tomorrow, next week, and next year. With that, I think this amendment does not make this bill any better, and I suggest we reject it. Thank you.
The chair recognizes the senator from Dickinson, Senator Whiting.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Zumbach, for your comments, and Senator Boulton for bringing up this amendment. One of the first things you said is that we should work to put parameters around the qualified immunities, and that's what the essence of the very bill is. Yes, malice is one of those factors that would trigger, as is intent, but also recklessness, a lower standard than that. And so we do have parameters in there, and I think that they're good parameters and good protections. One of the things that we see is that throughout all this, guidelines have come down from OSHA, the CDC, the state, and all over the place, and they're often conflicting. And so if I read through this, if I'm reading this correctly, if OSHA and the CDC would issue a guidance, the state regulators could treat it as an emergency temporary standard and enforce it. Well, if they want to do that, that's fine. They should just go through the rulemaking process. I think we should have parameters, and that's, I think what the safe harbor piece goes to is try to use the guidelines as best you can and follow them to the best of your ability, but they change daily. And so for those reasons, and those also mentioned by Senator Zumba, I would oppose the amendment.
The chair recognizes the senator from Woodbury, Senator Jay Smith.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in support of this amendment. On April 21st, I was perusing some of the newspaper articles, and I found a statement by the president of one of the packing plants close to Woodbury County, actually in Dakota County, but a lot of residents that work there live in my district. And he said, he denied the company's flagship beef plant was the main source of outbreak, that it was coming from the community. And then the next day, we had our first death. He worked at Tyson. He was 64. His name was Raimundo Corral. He was going to retire, but had decided to work a few more years. He was never tested, and he'd been sick for 2 weeks. So then let's go forward, and believe you me, when you're sitting in Woodbury County, looking at Perry, looking at Waterloo, it feels like tick, tick, tick. When is it going to hit my town? Well, it did. Woodbury is a hot spot. We have several processing plants there. Now let's go again. Another month. Tick, tick, tick. Now we have Buena Vista. 591 cases of Tyson's 2,300 workers tested positive. There was 2 months to get ready for this. And I want to say, I think we can do food processing safely. I do. And we need to open them. But there were 2 months, and then all of a sudden, 591 cases? Where were the provisions? Where were the safety? Where was the testing? We have to protect those brown and black workers, Asian workers, people that don't speak our language. They need us to protect them. And if we don't do it, I don't see the company voluntarily doing it either. If there's one issue that gets me hot, this is it. This is my constituency. And I was elected, as you were, to help them. Thank you.
The chair recognizes the senator from Johnson, Senator Bolkcom.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, Senate, I rise in support of Senate Amendment 5127 by Boulton, and thank him for bringing it. This is really the first amendment where we're talking about some sensible approach to making sure these packing plants can be profitable, stay open, protect the workers, and Senator Zumbach, protect the producers that rely on these workers. You know, we learned through the pandemic that we can't feed the world without hardworking Iowa farmers and hardworking packing plant workers, because they're joined at the hip. They both have to be healthy. They both have to be strong to be able to feed the world and to share the products of the labor of Iowans, right, with other people. And to this day, we still do not have enforceable guidelines for protecting those workers. We just have guidance. We had our first case on March 8th in Iowa. The pandemic arrived here on March 8th with 3 positive cases. In late March, there was an outbreak in Columbus Junction and in Tama. And on April 6th, both of those facilities had to close. Why did they close? Because so many people were testing positive. Couldn't keep the plants running. That began the calamity for Iowa pig farmers. And the approach up to that point, and really till today, is the governor repeatedly telling us at her pressers, I'm talking to them on the phone. I'm talking to them. They're doing everything they can do. But the state never sent any eyes and ears and help. I'm not saying we need to go out there and shut them down or regulate them. Why not show up and say, do you have what you need? Do you know what you're doing? How can we help? Columbus Junction didn't see its first inspector till April 30th. It closed on April 6th. It kind of got reopened. Waterloo was pretty predictable. Senator Dotzler, I see your lights on. Finally, Rod Roberts sent OSHA inspectors to Waterloo after 20 elected officials sent a letter to him on April 20th. On April 22nd, Tyson closed in Waterloo. 2 days later. What became extraordinarily predictable, as infection is running through these facilities, and it's just a matter of time before it hits them all, because then we had Perry, and we've had Sioux City, and we've had Storm Lake. The state, under the governor's leadership, said, we'll leave it up to the CEOs. They know best. Of course they want to take care of the employees. And that was a risk. And it's obviously they failed. And this amendment says it's no longer good enough to rely on the CEOs. We ought to have enforceable standards. And in talking to Rod Roberts at least 3 times during April, he was like, and if you know this, OSHA in Iowa is run by Iowa. They go out and inspect workplaces based on complaints. They had complaints about a bunch of these plants. He was reluctant to go out. Finally did. But he didn't have the guidance he needed. A couple times I talked to him, he said, Joe, I'm still waiting for the federal government, CDC, and OSHA to send me a document that tells me what I should do at a packing plant and how we should make sure they're safe. And I think in early May that finally arrived. But what arrived was a series of guidance ideas. Maybe you should think about doing these things. It didn't say, here are the things you're going to do, right? And in OSHA, we have all sorts of workplace protection in place. You can't expose people to hazardous chemicals and dangerous situations. There's all sorts of rules that are enforceable. But on this, we said, no, just go ahead and here's some guidance. Do it if you want to do it, if you don't want to do it. It's been a calamity for pig farmers. And I haven't heard anybody in the legislature that cares about keeping the supply chain going raise one word about the need to get a little tougher here. We can count on them. Well, one plant after another, they failed. And I don't know, Senator Zumbach, I guess some people are willing to say it was inevitable, it's going to be inevitable everywhere. And if it's inevitable the first time, it's probably going to be inevitable again. We're probably going to see another round of infection run through these same plants, which is a disaster for our state. I agree with you, we should keep these plants running, but they can't be run unless people are safe in them. And I think we've relied on these folks, and they've been a failure. And it comes to the governor, frankly. I mean, Rod Roberts works for her. Should have been all hands on deck after Perry and Tama, but it wasn't, and it's still not. That's the problem we have now. So as we look at the first bill we're taking up that you have brought to us to address the damage that the pandemic has done to Iowa in so many ways, we're telling these folks, hey, we don't want you to do anything different. By the way, if somebody's mad at you because somebody died that worked for you, we got your back. We're not going to let them sue you. And that just reinforces, unfortunately, this really bad behavior that continues to today. So it's time we put this amendment on this bill. It'll help agriculture. It'll help these workers. The state has a role here. I know you guys are reluctant to do you hate regulations, but sitting on your hands in the deafening silence since this first packing plant closed. I guess you just want to blame it on the workers because they went home at night and hung out with their neighbors. Give me a break. Give me a break. We need regulations. We need to be enforceable. Senator Boulton's on the right track here. Support this amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
The chair recognizes the senator from Black Hawk, Senator Dotzler.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, I also rise in support of this amendment, and I want to thank Senator Boulton for doing something that we tried to get done just by putting together a request that went to the governor and to OSHA with Senator Kinney and myself in a press release that we would sit down and try to put some guidelines together and try to work through this. So we made sure that our meat processing facilities remained open, and we didn't have that crisis we did across the state of Iowa, which required our hog farmers to lose money and to euthanize or to get rid of animals they could no longer afford to feed. You know, every producer in this state ought to be mad at the meat processors for what they did and their lack of paying attention. And Senator Zumbach, you know, I'm kind of shocked at your analogy about how it's the workers who socialize that really developed all this stuff, and it didn't happen in the factory or in the meat processing facility. That couldn't be further from the truth. That could not be further from the truth. You know, and one of the real travesties of what happened here is the fact that Iowa OSHA is a state-run plan, and there's more than 20-some states that have state-run plans. That means we don't have federal inspectors coming to our state to inspect facilities, we have our own Iowa OSHA. And one of the things that makes our Iowa OSHA one of the best is that we have a consultation division that employers can ask them to come in and give the employers advice about violations that they might see without any fear of being cited. They can say, listen, you're doing this wrong. Let's fix this part, and allow the employer to do that without any fear. Now, our OSHA labor commissioner, he was waiting for the federal government to give guidelines. I got news for you. They had them. Those guidelines were there with some of the earlier COVIDs and SARS. It's the same thing that we have right now. And in the federal standard, it says that states have to have at least what the feds have, and they can exceed what the feds have. And we weren't really asking much of that, because what does the feds say in the regulations that our labor commissioner was asking to see? Provide protections, personal protective equipment, so that when you're working next to somebody that has it, you don't get it. Well, they didn't do that. You know, what really gets my blood boiling is when this was occurring in Waterloo, our governor got up and said at her press conference, I'm concerned about the workers' safety and the health of workers, but more importantly, and this is a direct quote, we're keeping those plants open. More importantly than the health and safety of the workers in the state of Iowa, we are keeping those plants open. So in other words, to hell with the workers, let it happen to them. And what do you have in this bill? To hell with the workers. It's too bad it happened to you, but you don't have any recourse. Maybe it's the governor who everybody ought to be suing in the state of Iowa. I know where it came from in Waterloo. The governor asked Tyson how things were going. Well, we're taking care of the workers. We're doing everything right. When in the plant, in the processing facility, we were hearing directly from them workers. They were afraid of for their health, but they knew they had to come and work because Tyson, not unlike other facilities, has a work requirement that if you miss so many days, even if you're excused, you could lose your job. And a lot of those workers, immigrants that don't speak English very clearly, and I probably just sound like I don't either right now, that's the only place they could work. You can't work anywhere in America if you don't speak English unless it's some place that deals only with a certain community. They were stuck there no matter what, and they had a fear for their jobs. And they knew how dangerous it was. And those essential workers were treated as expendable workers because, more importantly, we're keeping the plants open. More importantly. You know, I know where the first cases came from in Iowa was people who went on a trip. They came, and I've seen the breakout, what happened in Lynn County. Wasn't that long, and all of a sudden, it was a nursing home that had a big blow up. Well, guess where a lot of those immigrant workers' spouses work? At nursing homes. We know how it got into the nursing homes in Black Hawk County. Good number of the people that worked there, the men worked in the meat processing facilities. their spouses, for the most part, the women, worked as health aides and housekeepers in our nursing homes, and we were scared. And I sat and listened to the Black Hawk County emergency management meetings, and then nursing homes were saying, listen, their spouses are working in these meat processing facilities, and we're worried that they're going to bring it into our facilities. Do you think we tested those workers, even though we knew that that was a strong possibility? No, we didn't. Well, what do you think happened in reverse in areas like Columbus Junction, where those same workers, those housekeepers, got infected because of the people that went on the trips and their families? They took it back to their spouses, and they ended up taking it into the meat processing facilities. Now, I don't know that as a fact, but I believe that that's what happened because I saw the reverse in Black Hawk County. And while Tyson was telling the governor, we're take care of our workers, we really care, guess what was happening in the plant? They had people that they knew were sick. They were vomiting on the floor of the facility and had high temperatures. You know what they did? Clean that area up and send them back to work. And the people that knew they were sick stayed there because they thought they were going to get terminated. And it kept going on and on. And when you have people working shoulder to shoulder and they are working hard, you're breathing hard. And we know that that's the number one way that this is transmitted. Through droplets, through speech, from exhaling and hard work and exercise. Well, if you didn't get it from the person next to you, you got it when you went to the locker room at the end of the shift. Because those locker rooms were so packed, it was elbow to elbow. There was no way you could hide from it. No personal protection, no masks. In an environment where you're shoulder to shoulder and everybody's breathing and trying to get the heck out of there. That's from a company that said they care about the workers. So when the pressure started getting on, well, they decided to take temperatures. Guess what? We had individuals who testified that they had a fever and they knew had a fever, and when they went to work, they were told, go ahead, go in. Go in. I've also had reports that they saw supervisors who didn't have enough hand sanitizer put water in those hand sanitizer bottles. And these are the people that you want to make sure that they have no liability. Well, we need to set standards, because if this bill passes and you do not accept this amendment, it's the Wild West. You can do whatever you want because there's no real rules. And, you got to show malice or reckless disregard. And I don't think you could probably show that necessarily in the facility at Tyson or any of these meatpacking plants. If you could, you probably wouldn't have it in this language. So when I hear somebody say that, we're waiting for the federal government when we have the right, or it's because certain ethnic groups in a community, they hang out together, and they didn't get it necessarily in a meatpacking plant. Come on. You know better than that. Waterloo, not only did we have cases of the workers, we had the contract people having it, and we had deaths also. And we had security people at the Tyson plant in Independence tell me that they were told to let anybody into that facility because they needed the workers. You know, and then the response that we get from our friends on the other side of the aisle is immunity to let them get away with whatever they want. You know, if we would have had these standards and applied them like we should have from the beginning, Senator Zumbach, we might not have had to shut our plant down. We might not have had to shut it down. And we wouldn't have been in this situation because they kept ignoring it. We had groups of people tell them ahead of time how bad this was. Let's stop it before it gets any worse. Fell on deaf ears. And the governor said that, well, we only had 444 cases, except for the truth of the matter was in Waterloo, that it was over 1,100, not counting the contract people that did the laundry, the security people, and all the others that were there. That was a third of the workforce. And it didn't count all the people that they got sent because we couldn't get tests. Yeah, you're sick when you go to people's clinic. They didn't have enough tests in Waterloo. Just go home. You've got all the symptoms. I'm sure you got it. So please, let's try to put some standards to go forward with. Let's not allow individuals and companies to get away with this forever. Senator Bolton really has something here that we can work together on. And the labor commissioner's got all the authority in the world to do it. So, Mr. President, I recommend that this body stands with Senator Bolton and approves his amendment. Thank you.
The chair recognizes the senator from Johnson, Senator Kinney.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, I was contacted by and was on a phone call with the EMA in Washington County when I began finding out about all the COVID cases that were coming into Washington County and how they had a direct tie with the packing house in Columbus Junction. Columbus Junction just sits 4 or 5 miles out of my district. So a lot of those people are living in Washington County in my district. What I learned from individuals as they began reaching out to me, these individuals were scared to talk to a legislator. These individuals were worried about their jobs. But some of these individuals said that they needed to stand up and tell what was going on in that plant. There was many people that were testing with the fever, that they had a fever, and they were told to come in. There were conditions in the plant where they felt that they were being ignored. They felt that if they didn't show up, they were going to be fired. One of the individuals was concerned that he had gotten and was over the COVID. The problem is he brought it home to his wife, and she was sick at home. He was worried that he wasn't going to be able to go back to work and was told that he had to go back to work. What then hit me was all the friends of mine that are farming and raising hogs. If this plant goes down, if we don't keep these workers healthy, we're not going to have a place for my friends to be able to take their hogs. These plants aren't going to be able to stay open. We need oversight in this, And I'm just rising to support Senator Bolton's amendment, which I feel is good policy.
The chair recognizes the senator from Dickinson, Senator Whiting.
Thank you, Mr. President, for indulging me to rise a second time. I just wanted to make a couple points to the debate, which I think has been very good and instructive, and thank you to all the senators that have spoken so far. Importantly, I want to say that I want businesses to follow the best practices, and indeed, under this bill, if they don't substantially comply with the best practices at that time, then they don't have any safe harbor immunity. So a suit could possibly come forward. And again, if a plant acts, or any business for that matter, acts recklessly or with malice or with the intent, a claim could come forward. And so some of the things that you suggested, Senator Dotzler, about ignoring temperatures and putting water in the hand sanitizer and things like that, if those recklessly, maliciously, or intentionally violated the standards at the time, a suit could still come forward. And importantly, as well, there's a provision in here that construes that workers' compensation claims aren't affected. And indeed, I saw an article from today in the Des Moines Register that the family of a deceased worker did file a workers' compensation claim. So that remedy exists. So I want them to follow the rules. If they don't have safe harbor. They can still be sued, and there are still other remedies under the law. Thank you, Mr. President.
Seeing no further discussion, the chair recognizes the senator from Polk, Senator Boulton, for final remarks on Amendment 5127 to Amendment 5111.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Whiting, for saying that you want them to follow the rules to get to the safe harbor, and that's exactly what this amendment is designed to do, is to put some rules behind this, to put some structure behind this. We did have a great debate here, and we raised a lot of good points here, a lot of very fair concerns. I appreciate Senator Kinney's comments here, talking about it does us no good in our agricultural community to have no place to take our hogs, to take our cattle to be processed. Yet that's what we are waiting to have happen in community after community, for the plant to actually become so overwhelmed with infections for it to close. And even then, the state is hands off. Senator Zumbach, that's exactly the concern. It does no one any good to let this trend continue. And your comments about people working together and then going home is exactly the threat to Iowans who don't work in meatpacking facilities. Yeah, we work for 8-10 hours a day, and then we go to the grocery store, we go to the gas station. And the infection that we have from the plant comes with us. And it comes to our home. And it gets in our community. When this legislative session shut down, up until the moment we started to see community spread, there were a whole lot of you on the other side of the aisle that said this wasn't really going to be a thing. And yet here we are, 627, 28 Iowans dead and counting. And yes, Senator Whiting is correct to point out that yes, another Iowan from another packing house was reported to have died in today's news. And here we are having this discussion about whether or not we should have rules around immunity provisions. It's pretty hard to process. Senator Zumbach, I do get passionate about workplace rights and workplace safety issues because they are personal to me. And when I see a trend like this growing in our state, I have a major problem with it. And then when I see this legislature reconvene and the only piece of legislation that's moving to address what's happening is to actually exclude people from the ability to make claims, I have a problem with that. We're going to talk about some other amendments as we go forward with tonight's debate. I will tell you, this is the easy one. This is the easiest one for us all to support and say we should at least be working together on solutions. We should at least work together to make sure there are uniform rules for people to follow to get to this immunity. The packing house that I went to in Marshalltown has worked together with the union there to try to make that workplace safer. They've added additional dining facilities and food service procedures to allow for minimal direct contact. They've now installed plexiglass screens between workers at their workstations, face masks and face shields for workers, one-way walkways and social distancing markers around break areas, hand sanitizer stations throughout the entire facility in every common area, in every hallway, touchless restroom fixtures that weren't there before, temperature screening not only upon entry but throughout hallways, protocols for tracking individuals who do test positive to make sure they know what other workers they would have interacted with. And yes, a $4 an hour pay increase for hazard pay to continue working and a $600 bonus. By working together on solutions to protect workers. The state should be doing its part too. This amendment gets the state to be an active, not passive, an active partner in making places around this state safer. Without this amendment, the state is an active partner in reducing the safety of facilities around this state. That's what we're voting on right now. So, Mr. President, with that, I ask the body to support the amendment, and I ask for a record vote.
The senator from Polk moves the adoption of Amendment 5127 to Amendment 5111 to Senate File 2318 and asks for a record vote. Those in favor of the amendment will vote yea. Those opposed will vote no. The Secretary will receive your vote. Senator Johnson votes no. Senator Sweeney votes no. Senator Knoyer votes no. Senator Quirnbach votes yea. Senator Breitbach votes no. Senator Chapman votes no. Senator Feenstra votes no. Has every senator voted? Every senator has voted. The Secretary will close the voting system. The Secretary will lock the voting system and record your votes. The Senate will pay attention to the result of the vote. Those voting yea, 18. Those voting no, 31. The amendment is defeated.